Welcome to the Virtual Ball Boys podcast. My name is Chris, and I am joined once again by my good friend, Matt.
We've done it, Chris. We've reached peak streaming culture.
Okay, and in what specific way?
So, of course, the Chiefs-Dolphins game was exclusive to Peacock this weekend.
Yeah.
Something that nobody wanted, ever.
No.
And probably wasn't even that good of a business decision, other than, the NBC Universal getting a bunch of people to sign up for Peacock and then forgetting to cancel their subscription, so it keeps renewing. Because that's the only reason they would ever broadcast it on Peacock, right?
They also got, they were like, oh, we got the most streaming, the highest streaming event in U.S. history. Like, yeah, no shit.
Because it's an NFL playoff game.
Right.
But the crazy thing about it, and why this is peak streaming, is because, of course, NBC, was still on air, right?
Yeah.
And they did a little bit of, football coverage for a bit, but then once that football coverage stops, do you know what they aired?
I believe it was, you know what, you reveal it, but I think I know what it is.
So it was the first episode of Deal or No Deal Island.
Yes.
A show exclusive to streaming Peacock. Which is something that they wanted to do to entice you to get Peacock, but if you were already watching the game anyway, you wouldn't have seen Deal or No Deal Island.
Right, you would have. Yeah. What the fuck is Deal or No Deal Island?
I don't know. I was at a fancy Italian restaurant, and it happened to be on the fucking TV. Yeah. But I was, paying attention to the people that I was with.
Yeah. That's... Huh.
I think it's Deal or No Deal, but they have to do challenges to make the money go higher to, get cases with bigger dollar amounts.
So, Traders meets Survivor meets...
I guess, but Boston Rob is on it, so...
Right. So then, there you go. Clearly they know where their inspiration's coming from. Meets Deal or No Deal. Huh. Okay. Well... That's that, I guess. Listen, have we run out of ideas as a society? Sure. Does that mean, maybe we could explore... Well, you know what? No. It's not that we've run out of ideas. We're just too scared of letting go of old ones.
Uh-huh.
And therefore we get Deal or No Deal Island.
Yep.
Because we don't... as if that's a show that we absolutely need to hold on to.
Brand recognition, Chris.
Yeah.
And Boston Rob is there. It works so well for the traders. It would actually did work out really well for the traders, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that came back, and I have to watch that. I'm holding off. I'm waiting till they upload more episodes.
Gotcha. There's 3 up right now.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna let it
want the whole season.
Yeah, potentially. It was nice when me and my mom watched it. On the first time around, we ended up having all the seasons were available. When I say all the seasons, meaning the US, UK, and Australia, everything was already available for us. So then we kind of watched at our own pace. I am very much looking forward to checking out this one though. All right. Well, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed having Peacock for the day. There is some good stuff on there, but beyond that, it's a weird decision. Mm-hmm. I think everyone's just we are moving towards an era where streaming is the only way to watch shows nowadays, and I feel like we're trying companies are trying to shoehorn that, and it's just I think that's just gonna happen more gradually than you think it is.
Yep.
I don't understand the methodology of forcing everyone to go with Peacock, but whatever, it's fine.
But no, it's Taylor Swift ruining the NFL.
Yeah, it's real.
Fuck Tony Dungy.
There is so many things wrong with the NFL, and I'm not sitting here being the biggest Taylor Swift fan, but I don't think that she is the sole reason for anything wrong with the NFL.
No.
It's bizarre. People are weird. If it has nothing to do with football, then therefore it's bad for the NFL.
But also a woman is doing it, so
Right. Right. Yeah, it's bad. All right. Welcome to our wild card recap episode. We're going to go through each of the games, talk about them, and of course, we'll touch on anything the latest on the coaching tracker, anything that has been in development, and we will of course then give our picks for the divisional round. So pretty straightforward, easy episode, if I do say so myself. Let's get into it. We're going to go in order. So not so much in order of news relevancy. We're going to go in order of the games. So we're going to start off with the Saturday game between the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. And Matt, this was initially seemed like a nice close game because it ended up being a little bit of like a shootout out of the gate. The Texans the Texans got a couple of scores, but the Browns were kind of inching ahead of them here and there. And then the floor fell out of the Cleveland Browns, and C.J. Stroud just went off. And I'm just looking up now. I'm trying to remember even what the final score was. This is the last year's playoffs. What the fuck are we doing? Anyways, the final score was 45-14. And this was the start of a trend for the weekend. Because I think everyone was maybe getting a little too excited about how these matchups are going to play out. We ultimately only got one game that ended within a single score. Which is a bummer. But the Texans, surprised, they were the underdogs and they won their game. What did you think about this game?
I was thrilled. You know, I'm a big Stroud fan. I like to see him succeed, and it's a perfect comeuppance for the Browns for all the shitty things that they've done.
Yeah.
The one massive shitty thing that they did that the rest of their players don't necessarily deserve, but the organization does.
Yes, no, I could see that. Yeah, I think it's now putting them in a very difficult spot because it initially felt like they could get away with the idea of, you know what, we're gonna ride this journeyman quarterback deep into the playoffs, and we're gonna get the title that we promised our fans, because we have the stacked roster. Everything's gonna be great. And now that they enter the offseason, it definitely feels like all eyes are once again on the fact that they made the decision that they did to again sign the deal with the devil, and they will have to deal with the idea of him being the quarterback, and there has been no sign that he is going to return to form in any capacity. He had maybe one good game.
Mm-hmm.
during the season, and otherwise it's been rough. And him being injured again and not playing again, I don't know how easy it's going to be for them to even hope for that he could get back to the level that he was at. And again, it just, all of it is the perfect comeuppance of a team that got too desperate and did something that they did not need to do, and ultimately did. I as much as this Browns team was a lot more likable without him playing, I'd much rather the Texans move on to the next round. Even though it's a little awkward that this is the game. This was the old team of Deshaun Watson. like it was that the fact that this game, that storyline kind of flew under the radar a bit. But it kind of showed that, like, hey, we are now as an organization in a much better place, and the players that we got out of it, and the players that we're going to continue to get out of that trade, are going to help us build around C.J. Stroud and build an organization that's going to win for now and into the future.
Yeah,
it was just a big old rubbing in the face of the Browns.
If there was ever a game to, like, wipe the Texans free of their sins, This is the perfect one.
Yeah, it really it does feel like that for sure. And then so that was the 4:30 game. Then we shifted to Peacock. Everyone who had to purchase this streaming platform to watch this one game, and it was the Miami Dolphins at the Kansas City Chiefs. And the storyline going into this game was that this shit was cold. It was very cold.
Yeah.
It was the negative 20-something wind chill. I believe just the overall temperature was in the negatives. It was bad. It was really rough out there. And Kansas City ended up coming up with the win here, 26-7. And the story of this game really comes down to a Chiefs offense that looked a little better. Granted, it was against a Dolphins defense that has been beaten up, injured, lost a lot of their players.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, but really, there's the story of why they won this game was their defense, and it's been the story of their entire season has been that this defense is the biggest reason why they have won these games. And so for the Chiefs, they move on to another team that is, we'll get to it, another team that's dealing with defensive injuries, but maybe going to be a harder atmosphere for them because it'll be the first time that they're going to be playing on the road in the Patrick Mahomes era, which is very interesting. For the Dolphins, you could not have asked for a worse 3 weeks for the Miami Dolphins. Who got their ass ripped in half, more than it's already ripped in half, by the Ravens. Then losing the division to the Bills, where it was completely in your control, and then losing this game. And every sort of goodwill that Tua Tagovailoa ended up building in this season feels like it's almost out the window, just because of how poorly he ended up playing, and then everyone who ultimately did not show up in this game on the offensive side of the ball, maybe with the exception of Tyreek Hill, who had one pretty big catch that delivered a touchdown, but that was literally their only score of the game. Any thoughts about how this game turned out, or the Dolphins in general?
Well, thanks to a game later, the Dolphins are now the longest spanning franchise without a playoff win.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And I still feel hopeful for them. They just got super unlucky, and partially their own play these past few weeks. Right. I still have hope for them next year, but this is just the collision course that was waiting to happen, and that I think a lot of us were seeing coming.
Yeah, I brought up the Tua storyline, and I'm not I think I'm much more of a fan of Tua than I think others out there in terms of I think that he could play the game. It's just he's just in a period right now where he's not winning the big one. He's just not winning in this big spot, and it's so weird because I don't know. I get it's different stages, but I always think back to when he was at Alabama and he replaced Jalen Hurts halfway through the championship game against, I think it was Georgia.
Yep.
And how he just came in and was just incredible in that game. And I don't know, it just I feel like that player could still be there, and he showed it this year that how good of a player he can be, but he just hasn't been able to get over the hump of, hey, this is, you have these big teams that you're facing and you're not able to beat any of them, and that's just a bummer. So I don't know. I the Dolphins have some things to figure out. He is I believe, going to be going into the last year of his contract after they picked up the 5th-year option. They have to figure out whether or not they want to extend him. I think in general they want to open up cap space. So
yeah,
it's going to be a weird off season for them because they're going to have to figure out what they want to do moving forward at that position. All right, then we move to Sunday, and I mean, so initially it was going to be Bills and Steelers, or Steelers and Bills, and that was delayed to Monday because of the snowstorm that came in.
Yep.
So instead, the first game of the day was the Green Bay Packers at the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Cowboys, long being the most consistent team out there, as being a team that is known for performing incredibly well in the regular season and then just shitting the bed when it comes to postseason, I think put on the greatest performance that they have ever put on.
Who would have thought?
In this game, where the final score was 48-32 Green Bay Packers. But that's not even like that seems a lot closer than what it was. It was much worse than that for them in this game, and as of this taping, we do not know what the future holds for Mike McCarthy, if he will be let go. We don't know what the future of this team is really going to be in general, because this felt like their year. This felt like they could finally get over the hump. But once again, the Cowboys do be cowboying in general. We'll talk about the Packers in a second, but go ahead. I want your thoughts on the Cowboys.
The Cowboys are just so fucking funny, Chris. Like, I would be cheering this game more if it was against literally any other team. And that's just me, like, in my rooting interest. But
sure.
Oh my god, seeing the Cowboys just shit the bed is always just so fucking funny.
It's wild.
It's so funny. And, like, Jerry Jones brings it on himself. Like, he's the one who hired Mike McCarthy. It's all because of Jerry. Cowboys fans' happiness is dictated by Jerry Jones, a man who does not know how to make a successful football team and never will.
Yeah, I mean, like, we give the Cowboys so much credit because they do have so many talented players that they draft, that they build, and they do. They're so, like, they do the things that we expect successful teams to do, and then
they can't get past the divisional round of the playoffs ever.
Right, they didn't even get past the wild card round this time around. It's wild, and like we talked about it going into this game, like the Packers are a known kind of like they were a heel for this Cowboys team in the past, like many years ago at this point now, but you go back to 2014, 2016, like those amazing games between these two squads and how close it was, but ultimately the Packers ended up winning. One game, of course, was ended up being the catch game. But it is just wild to look at this and be like, how did you let this happen again? How could you be the very first 2 seed to not play in the divisional round ever? Ever. Yep. Of course it's the Cowboys. It's the Cowboys.
The best part also to come about this is Skip Bayless's throwing away his Cowboys merchandise, which this one was extra funny for 2 reasons. 3 really. One was just how much shit he had.
Sure.
2 was how labored he was in his breathing when he was throwing the stuff out. And then 3 was he was doing it in a trash can with an automatic lid that kept closing on him every time he went to put something in. So he kept having to open it back up just to throw it in again when he was already mid-motion.
Oh my god. I will say this. I cannot stand sports talk shows at all.
Uh-huh.
That being said, whenever the Cowboys blow it like this, the 2 people I always want to go see is Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless.
100%.
Because Stephen A. Smith is the exact opposite. He is a certified cowboy hater, and he every single year he predicts that the Cowboys are going to blow in some capacity, and every single time people come out and are like, no, this is different. It's different this year. And this just the sly look that he has on his face whenever he turns on the camera after a Cowboys playoff loss, and he just cuts to him, and he just starts laughing, like his snicker that he has. It's so good. I'm not a fan of either of them really, but like it's just very good. It's very good content whenever the Cowboys end up blowing it. Like it just is, and I feel bad. I actually do feel bad for Cowboys fans. I know it's like I know everyone finds you obnoxious, and I get it. You kind of are, but like it has been so fucking long since this Cowboys team has had success. At least to make it to the NFC Championship game. The fact that you haven't been there since the 90s is wild, considering how consistently you have been in the playoffs, and every single time how your team lets you down. It's wild. I'll be the bigger person here, Matt, and I want to give my kudos to the Green Bay Packers. Because
Frogers isn't on the team anymore, so I feel less bad about it. Go ahead.
That's fair. That's fair. Either way, I wouldn't blame you. But I have looked at this idea of Jordan Love taking over as Aaron Rodgers as, like, I always thought it would be interesting. It would be fascinating if they pulled it off again. But I will admit I was a bit skeptical about that working, because of the fact that, like, for any time that we had seen Jordan Love prior to this year, it was never in, like, I don't think that he ever played at his best. I felt like I think about his debut and how that ended up being like a poor game against the Chiefs. And then earlier this year, when it was like when they were bad, and we did bury them before they were zombified. That team, like, and it just didn't feel like he was the future. It felt like, all right, finally the Packers are going to deal with quarterback issues. Finally, we have reached a point where the Packers are now going to have to look for a new quarterback. And the fact that this man put up a perfect passer rating in this game and has been playing out of his mind during the second half of this season and put up his best performance against a supposedly amazing defense, it's nuts. Like, the Packers are like the exact, almost feel like the opposite of the Cowboys. Like, they also haven't had, like, they've also faltered in the postseason a lot, but, like, they feel like they get their guy, and we're just, in the next few years, we're probably going to see the Packers win the Super Bowl again, because that's just how they do it.
And then they won't again for another decade.
But... And then they won't again for another decade, right. But it's just, it just feels incredible that they have done it again. And I don't think that the 49ers are this guaranteed to move on. I know that they're favored. I think that they're going to win it.
Yeah.
Spoilers. But, like, I don't know, because we've seen this happen before with the Packers, where they are a wild card team and then they go on to win the Super Bowl. So it's just like, I don't know. It's just nuts. And I give a lot of credit to the Packers for being in this position, even though I also think their defense has not been good, but then they played their best game on Sunday, so it's just kind of like, I don't fucking know. It's bizarre.
It's bizarre.
I know, as a Bears fan,
it's torture that we get another great quarterback, like, right in a row.
Yeah. I do want to acknowledge, though, I did not realize that this was a story before until it was brought to my attention. But I'm just going to read this Mina Kimes tweet here, where she says, "The future of the NFC North is a 25-year-old who calls being ticklish having silly body."
Oh my god.
Life comes at you fast.
Was my response, "I'm in hell"?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm in hell, hell in all capital letters. And I'm like, yeah, I feel that. Alright, let's talk about Sunday night. It was the Rams, it was the Lions, and this was the playoff game that ultimately ended up delivering a fantastic game where both quarterbacks played very well. I think Stafford was on another level in this game, and it's why it ended up being as close as it was. But the Lions, who it ended up faltering a little bit, like they ended up their offense kind of slowed down in the second half, only scored 3 points, but with a 25-24 lead, Jared Goff, or 24-23 lead rather, Jared Goff ended up throwing a dart to none other than Amon-Ra St. Brown to close the game out. And for the first time in the history of the Detroit Lions, they are hosting a second playoff game and have moved on to the divisional round for the first time since the 90s.
Yes.
It's that is a very good, nice story there.
I do love the kind of like karmic justice for the blatant like the refs just fucking up at the Detroit Dallas game.
Yeah.
To now having it be righted so that Detroit gets a second home playoff game and Dallas is out of the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, like the Lions are now basically the default second
best seed.
Yeah, which is really, really nice. And
if the Packers end up winning, they get and the Lions also win, they get a third playoff game at home.
right. It's nuts. It is absolutely nuts that that this team has in 3 years turned things around completely in a way that has that they do look like that like. I don't doubt that they could make it to the Super Bowl. I think you have one massive superpower in the NFC that you have to get through. If you can get through them, you have a shot to do this in Dan Campbell's third year, in terms of winning the Super Bowl potentially, which is nuts. And to even make it there would be an achievement in its own way. Making it to this point is an achievement of its own way. It is now a completely different type of team here. The Lions are just in such a phenomenal position now, because now, and we'll talk about it in a bit, but they are taking on an NFC South team that ultimately had its ups and downs this year. It doesn't really look like it has a ton of it doesn't seem like it's gonna be like harder than the Rams, but I mean, I don't want to jinx it because it absolutely could. Like the Bucs could end up coming out and playing their best game of the year, but it's just nuts that they're in this position right now where we could see this team go all the way to the NFC Championship game in the third year of Dan Campbell, the marriage of Jared Goff and Dan Campbell working out together. Any other thoughts on this game?
I'm so happy for the Lions. Like, this is the most stressed I was all weekend, like, watching games. And seeing, like, you always, like, worry when there's, a team like this. Like, this is one of those teams that could just suddenly, like, shit the bed at any point. Mm-hmm. Because so many teams have done that this season. But the Lions, they kept strong. They kept to it. I do think that they have the potential to maybe go all the way.
Yeah, this was a team that had not like you mentioned, like that they had not won a playoff game in 3 decades, and it took them a long time to get to this point. Finally, where they can overcome that. Like again, like even if they lose next week, it would be a disappointment. But like they did overcome some demons this season, but man, like if they could keep going, that would just be incredible. And this is such an easy team to root for, just considering the fact that it has been so long since this team had any sort of like we're talking like the 50s, I think, since they won like an NFL championship, or like pre-Super Bowl era. Like we're talking a long time ago. So would be really awesome to see. All right, let us move on to the Monday games here. This is where the Steelers Bills kicked off at 4:30, and this one was like a bit tighter than the final score. has suggested. We're it. I was gonna say it's weird how the 2-7 games were the closer, but I forgot that I'm thinking Detroit Rams, not Dallas Green Bay. Dallas Green Bay was a slaughter, but in the reverse direction. The Steelers, despite I think having like just kind of keeping it as close as possible, they were they were they were not going to be able to stop the Bills, who have just all the momentum going into the postseason, and have been just playing absolutely out of their minds. It was a closer game down the stretch, but really what this game came down to is that Josh Allen didn't really make a ton of mistakes. In fact, I don't think he even threw an interception or anything like that. And the final score ended up being 31-17. Again, it was a closer game. It was like 24-17 before ultimately a couple of like one more score ended up putting it over the edge for the Bills. There was some fun touchdowns in this game. One where Josh Allen, it seemed like he was going to get tackled, and then all of a sudden he just kind of ran it in for the score, and that was super exciting. And then Khalil Shakir, who's been kind of an underrated weapon for them this season, he also had one where he seemed like he was going to get tackled in the middle of the field, and then he just kept on running, and it seemed like one more tackler was about to come in and knock him down before he reached the goal line, and he ended up like tackling like a completely separate Bill. It was actually kind of funny if you were paying attention to it. But then Khalil got in. I believe that might have actually been the score that tipped it to 31 points.
I think it was
for them. Just to, this was the game that going into the weekend we kind of expected the Bills to win. Maybe it was we thought it would be more of a blowout than it ended up being. It was very close. But the Bills still got it done. But they are also dropping like flies a little bit too. Few key defenders for them went down with injuries over the course of this game. Some of them, though, are, as of our recording, are practicing this week, and they are going to be facing the team that has really gotten them in a lot of trouble in recent years, which is the Kansas City Chiefs. But luckily, this time on their own home turf. Any thoughts on this game overall?
It was nice to see the Bills continue their success. Man, if only the Steelers had a quarterback, huh?
Yeah.
They do need a lot of other help, and obviously TJ Watt being out obviously hindered their defense quite a bit, but
yeah.
The Steelers aren't necessarily a team that I want to see have success, but I do like Tomlin, and I do think that like there are a couple big roster pieces away from having a really good season.
Yeah, I mean, like,
sometime.
I'll give Rudolph credit in the fact that he did have a pretty decent stretch, but yeah, like, is he really like going to be the answer for the future? Probably not. It was supposed to be Kenny Pickett, but he hasn't really proven anything yet. I mean, it was only his second year, but I mean that draft class has been kind of regarded as one of the worst quarterback draft classes going into it, and now coming out of it, there's really the only other starter that, I mean, there's Sam Howell,
right,
who kind of feels like he might not be the starter there in Washington anymore. There's Desmond Ridder, who had plenty of opportunities, never got going. Malik Willis was the Titans quarterback, right? And
he's now like third string and didn't turn out.
Right, and Will Levis is going to replace him.
Yep.
So
and then fucking Brock Purdy. Like
that's true. That's fair.
Brock Purdy is technically part of that quarterback class, but
if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl, are they gonna have like the Brock 6, like they have the Brady 6 or something? Or I don't know how many quarterbacks were drafted in front of him.
Yeah.
But however many it would be the max amount since he was the very last player taken. Man, yeah, I don't know. It feels like the Steelers, that have not been able to kind of like regain that same amount of success that they had with Big Ben. Not really a huge surprise, but they've had a great defense. They continue to have a great defense, and it just is, it's hard for them to get over that. I will say there is going to be a lot of hand-wringing over Tomlin's reaction to the contract situation that he was in. He was asked after the game, or at least was started to ask after the game, about how he has 1 year on his contract. And he just walked out of the room, which I get his frustration. I also get why people were annoyed with him not just answering the question, even if it was just like a no comment, like he didn't really have to walk out. But I don't blame him either. I do like him as a coach. I think that he deserves a lot more credit than he has gotten over the years, and it would be very interesting to see if he can bring this team any further past the wild card round next year, because I do think there's a lot of good players on this team, a lot of young weapons, and of course the defense. So yeah, we'll see. All right, we'll close things off with the game that everyone is talking about, the one because it put a nice little cherry on top of the shit Sunday that was the end of the Philadelphia Eagles season. A 32-9 defeat by the Bucs. And I want to start here because I like the Bucs. I want to give credit to. I think Todd Bowles doesn't get enough credit as a coach. I think that I get that he does make some weird choices. I think every coach makes weird choices. So I feel like that people get hung up about that, and therefore like, oh no, he's not that good of a coach. But he's constantly gotten them into a position that they're going to be winners, and that they are, even if it is like as a 9-8, 8-9 team, like you're in a bad division, so it helps that you're kind of on the mediocre line. But I don't know. I think that his defense constantly plays well, and the players seem to always love to rally around him. So I want to give him more credit that he gets. I also think Baker Mayfield deserves a ton of credit. He played very well in this game. He also had a couple close to turnover moments, but overall played very well. And I hope that the Lions don't look past this team, because I do think that they can be a tough out. That game, even though it ended up being 26, was like the final when these two teams first met the last time, Lions Bucks. That was a closer game than it seemed going in terms of the final score. Like that, I believe it was like the fourth quarter when the Lions finally pulled away. So we'll see. So I don't think the Lions are like a shoo-in, but it's mainly because I think the Bucks they're a decent team. Do I think they're maybe the worst team left potentially? But I don't know. I give a lot of credit to the Bucks.
I do too. Baker also joins like a group of quarterbacks that's like 4 or 5. He's the 4th or the 5th. I think I'm missing a name of Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, who have won a playoff game for 2 different teams. Yeah, I think there's one more on that list that I'm missing, but.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, right? Like he's like even if he's probably going to be destined to be a journeyman quarterback for the rest of his career, like he could show like, oh no, I'm a legitimate backup quarterback at the very least.
I even think he's done enough to be the Bucs quarterback next season.
I don't disagree. It would be cool to see that. I think it may depend on how he plays in this next game. We'll see. But I don't disagree. I think he deserves a lot of credit there. Man, this Eagles team. This was a brutal game, and I don't think that since I've started watching football that it's been this much of a collapse from a team that still has their quarterback.
So
I don't know. I think about like the Cardinals back in like 2015 or 2016, whatever it was. No, probably 2014. Where they lost Carson Palmer, and then they had to cycle through a couple backup quarterbacks. They got to the wild card round as a 5th seed, and then got knocked out by the Panthers. It kind of that kind of reminds me of this, but they still had Jalen Hurts playing. It's wild. What were we gonna say?
I compare this a lot to the 11-0 Steelers from a few years ago.
Yes,
But the difference is that even though the Steelers were 11-0, you saw the cracks and you saw the teams that they were playing. Yeah. That wasn't the case with this year's Eagles. They were legitimately dominant for a lot of the season.
Yeah. They were 10-1.
10-1, and then just fucking collapsed after that. The curse of the NFC East is strong.
Yeah, like, the fact that, like, the last two games being against the Cardinals and Giants, and, like, don't get me wrong, like, Kyler Murray had like a pretty decent end to the year, and the Giants, they played well at moments. Like, it wasn't a complete disaster for the Giants, even though I think overall we look at the season as a failure. But, like, man, that's still that is still two teams you don't want to lose to down the stretch, and then, like, that's not even accounting to the fact that before that point you were on a losing streak the way you were, and it's brutal. It's just an utterly brutal end to the year and an end of an era for a lot of Eagles players. Jason Kelce probably is going to retire. He seemed to walk back the idea during his podcast this week, but I by all accounts, it seems like that he probably played his last game. We don't know the future of Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox. Like, there's a lot of Eagles, longtime Eagles players that, like, you don't even know if they're going to be back next year, and I don't know. Like, it feels like. Let me ask you this: do you think that Nick Sirianni should keep his job?
Yes.
Okay.
Because he took you to the Super Bowl last season.
Yeah.
Right? And you still had a good enough start to the season. Made some very questionable decisions this season, for sure.
Yeah.
Like switching to Matt Patricia as your DC, but get him out of the building, recenter yourself, go on next season, and figure it out there. Now, next season, if you see the same problems, then I think he goes.
Yeah.
But I don't think, like, this 6-game stretch of, like, don't get me wrong, horrendous football is enough to have him lose his job when he got you to the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago.
Yeah. I'm so torn because I think I'm with you. I think I wouldn't fire him, but it just feels like it came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just feels like all of a sudden things just took a turn, and maybe it was the decision to switch to Matt Patricia as your DC, but your offense also was having issues. Like,
also
your offense also fell apart, and, like, I don't look at this game and be like, oh, well, they didn't win this game because AJ Brown wasn't there. There's so, like, I don't even know how you begin to pinpoint what the issues there are. And when that's the case, I feel like the blame does go to the person in charge.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel it would feel wild to have made it to the Super Bowl and then to lose your job next year. It has happened before. I believe John Fox that happened to when he was the coach of the Broncos.
Yeah.
And then got fired and Kubiak took over and then the Broncos won the Super Bowl next year. So, it's not it's unprecedented, but it's not like it hasn't happened before. But man, I just don't know if it's like I don't know what they do. It feels like they're in a lose-lose situation because they are going to lose so many players that they've had on their roster for a while, and then on top of that, like just so many questions. There is going to be some sort of coaching change, whether it's just being the coordinators or if Sirianni goes himself.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
And in a stacked year for coaching, in terms of who's out there for candidates, I don't know. Maybe they want to explore. Maybe they would want to explore the market a bit. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be really interesting. All right. Speaking of the stacked year for coaching, we have a couple of headlines to talk about. We had teased it going into to our podcast on Thursday, and basically I think when we uploaded it, the news had become official. But Bill Belichick is officially no longer the head coach of the Patriots. This was a expected move. It felt like that it was moving in that direction, and a surreal one, because it is the official end of the Patriots as we know it. They're gonna exist. Like they could exist and they could get better and everything. I'm not saying they're dead, but the era that we had known the Patriots for the last 2 decades, that version of the Patriots is no longer existing, and it's surreal. And Matt, you feel like this is the right move, right?
I felt like this for a while. You need to spark change somehow.
Yeah.
In this Patriots team, and Bill is a fantastic coach, but I don't think he's the right person to spark that change.
Yeah.
Because he's been with the team so long, it's hard to, I don't know, I'm just going to keep repeating myself. It's hard to spark the change. It's hard to change the way that you're doing things when you're the same guy in charge. So I think that this was the right move. Jared Mayo, his replacement, been with the team for a while, so is going to be able to have some consistency, but I'm fascinated by what he's going to do with this team going forward.
Yeah. That was going to be the next thing. But Jerome Mayo feels like a fascinating fit. He has been a coach there for 5 years. And obviously he has history of being on the team for a long time. He was a linebacker with them who played very well for them. He was the defensive rookie of the year. He is, and by all accounts, like I watched his press conference, he seems like a guy that's ready to take over the position. I will say one of my favorite quotes from the press conference. He made history of being the first black head coach of the Patriots, and Robert Kraft was asked about that, and Kraft gives like the usual canned answers that these owners always do, of being like, "Oh well, I don't see color. I am someone who just looks at who's going to be the best person for the job." And right after that, Gerard Mayo says, I don't know if he was just responding to Kraft or if someone asked him a follow-up question, but he was like, "I do see color, and if you don't see color, you don't see racism." And I was just like, "That's a
Which
good
is
quote.
awesome.
That's a great quote."
Yeah.
It's true, and I don't know, like he seemed like he realized the history that he was making in being in this role, and I kind of just appreciated that, and I appreciate the honesty from him. I felt there's something about him that I just, and granted, we've been burned by good press conferences before. Like a good press conference doesn't mean that you're going to be a great head coach, but I don't know. Yep. I overall seem like, oh, this makes sense. They've clearly seen him as a successor to Belichick. They put it into his contract so that way they didn't even need to interview anyone else to meet like the Bruni rule or anything. So
yep.
The fact that they hired him on the spot, and he, I think that, like, okay, this feels like a good transition to someone new. As for Belichick, he has the only team that we know that he has interviewed for is the Falcons, which is nuts in his own way. When the Falcons announced this, it was very. It felt weird seeing him in the Falcons graphic and them saying that they had interviewed him. I will say, if I had to pick somewhere where I think, like, okay, this is where I think Belichick would fit, it would be with a roster that's already pretty built. It would be with a roster that has a lot of good players on it, and a team that only needs like that last push by a head coach, or like just needs that like one last like leadership thing added to them. And I feel like the Falcons are a team where I think that would be an interesting hire. I would be fascinated to see who he hires as his offensive coordinator, because he could go McDaniel, and honestly, that's not like, I don't think that's like the worst hire. I mean, I know that McDaniel's, I mean, clearly after everything that happened this year, people have made it clear how much they don't like him as a head coach, but as a coordinator, he has a lot of success, and people when he's not in that position of power, it seems like McDaniel does a good job. So it feels like that could be the case, but I don't know. And it depends on who they hire as their quarterback. Like, are they going to roll out a rookie with Bill Belichick, or are they going to go with a veteran? Like,
trade for Justin Fields, something like that.
Right, well, right.
Kirk Cousins.
There's this is going to be a fascinating market because I haven't really been like keeping tabs on what the offseason is going to look like, but I imagine there's going to be at least some veteran quarterbacks that are going to be in the mix in terms of potentially being moved on from their teams. Fields, is definitely one of them. Cousins not even under contract, right? Like, he's gonna be a free agent, or if not, he is potentially on the trade block. Like, I'm fascinated, and that on top of the fact that Jim Harbaugh is also interviewing with the Chargers and with the Falcons, it's like. There's some fascinating candidates that are out there. Mike Vrabel, we haven't even seen where Mike Vrabel, like, I don't think anyone has even said if he's interviewed anywhere.
I don't think I've seen anything, which is wild.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe he wants to take a year off or something. I don't know, but a lot of people thought that he would take the Patriots job, but it seemed like the Patriots were very key, like very much wanting to go with their succession plan that they had built with Mayo. So I don't know. I'm very curious. And the other thing too is that it seems that there hasn't been any major coaching news beyond what I've mentioned, but it seems like we're moving in a direction where Antonio Pierce is probably going to be the head coach of the Raiders. The Raiders have only done like a couple of head coaching interviews, and beyond that, they all signs are indicating that he's going to be hired. Max Crosby basically even put like basically said, like, you have to hire him, otherwise I'm requesting a trade. like he basically put this vendetta on the Raiders owner to make the
ultimatum.
Ultimatum. That's that. I was looking for that word. It was it was just lost my mind.
I figured.
But yeah, like, it's. Do I think that's like the most amazing hire ever? No, but like I'm a big believer of, like, hey, if the players like him, hire him. I think that's it's a very basic thing, but like, I don't know. There's something to be said about, like, you want to have good chemistry with your team, and if the head coach is someone that the team is rallying around and wants to work with and is excited to work with, then hire him, give him a shot. Like, it's not like the Raiders are entering a weird space anywhere, so it's not going to be the end of the world if they hire him and it doesn't work out. Yeah, like, I don't know. I think I'm okay with that move if they go in that direction. All right, last but not least for this episode, we're going to go ahead and pick the divisional round games. 4 games, all of which I think are pretty interesting. I like the look of all of these. I think they all have some degree of fascinating things that could happen. I also could see 3 blowouts too. Like I mean, I guess that could happen as well, but I kind of like I think that every single team that's made it to this point has a shot in these games, and that's always what you want in a divisional round. One of the best weekends of playoff football out there. I mean, there's only 4 weekends of playoff football, but you know what I mean. I think it's the best. I think divisional rounds always delivers in some capacity. So, without any further ado, the Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens coming off of their bye. They are getting back Mark Andrews, potentially. Which is a big deal for them. And now they have to go against the rookie, the probable offensive rookie of the year at this point, CJ Stroud, who is really doing a great job carrying this team. And I am fascinated with this game because, man, the last time that the Ravens had the Ravens were the 1 seed back in 2018. I forget what year it was.
2019.
2019. Man, it feels so much longer than that. But when they faced the Titans and the Titans took them out, it was such a stunner. And I worry about those vibes, Matt. But what do you think is going to happen here?
Yeah, the Texans proved that they were not slouches, and they definitely earned their division win, even through the Stroud injury. Obviously, a Jaguars collapse also helped with that, but
100%.
There's a lot to love on both teams. I still feel like with the amount this is the Ravens. Ravens, had their bye, but then also like sat most of their starters for Week 18. So it's been a while since they have played, and we just fucking saw the MLB playoffs.
Right.
The best teams that had a bye or sat got fucking shellacked.
Yeah.
So it's not a guarantee whatsoever that the Ravens and 49ers are going to come out and win. That said, I really fucking like the Ravens, Chris. I am okay with either team winning this game, as much as heartbreaking as it would be for the Ravens, and you see the Texans, having a brighter future, or still having a bright future. I'm going to pick the Ravens here, but it's not a, slam dunk.
Yeah. I hate this game only because it is two teams I like. Mm-hmm. And either way, you get some history for either team. History more for the Texans, I guess, but the Ravens winning this game means that Lamar Jackson finally won a playoff game. The fact that he's finally gets over that hump would just be glorious for them. The fact that he would make it to the AFC Championship game and host the AFC Championship game would be so huge for them. And I really love that. And then on the Texans side, if they pull it off, then they make it to the AFC Championship game for the first time ever. The Texans have never been, and that's really, really cool. And I hate the idea of either of these teams' story ending. But I'm going to give it to the team that has been the better, who has played better over the course of the year, and that's the Ravens. And man, the Texans pull it off here, I might just pick them next week, regardless of who's the opponent, because winning this game, I think, would just be huge. It feels like the Ravens are the Super Bowl favorite right now, and if you could pull off winning against them here, that could go a long way.
Absolutely. All right, who's the next game?
Packers-Niners.
The Green Bay Packers at the 49ers, the other 1 seed, hosting the 7 seed. Packers did manage to overcome the Dallas Cowboys. However, they face their recent playoff nemesis, the San Francisco 49ers, who are coming off of also a fantastic season, coming off of their bye, but have shown some weakness and have shown that they can't fucking play from behind.
Yeah.
That is the 49ers worst aspect of themselves. So both teams are going to want to get out to a lead early and try their best to hold on to it. Do you think the young Packers team has a chance against this stacked of a 49ers roster?
It really comes down to love, right? If he plays out of his mind again, then they have a really good chance. One of the things that we didn't talk about, but I think set the tone for the Cowboys game, was the Packers did what usually teams don't do, which is, hey, we'll take the ball first. We'll take the ball first to start off this game, and it kind of worked. It set off this hey, we're not afraid to take this ball and shove it down your throat here, and just keep on doing that constantly. And I think that would be the way, the journey for them to get to this win. I also think that this might be the hardest hill to overcome here. If they were facing anyone else, I would really give it to them. But I think I just feel like the 49ers have been in this position before. They haven't lost in the divisional round, and they certainly haven't lost the divisional round to the Packers, who had, again, like you mentioned, the 49ers have had the Packers number in the playoffs here. So I'm going to give it to the 49ers, although I'm not confident.
I am maybe setting myself up for disappointment. And maybe I will have a very bad day on Saturday, but I am full force on the 49ers. I do think that they will win this game.
Yeah. Absolutely. Granted, I am not confident about any of these picks. I mentioned that I'm like nothing will surprise me this weekend. Is what it comes down to. All right, next up, the Sunday early game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions, 3 p.m. Yeah, Lions coming off of a massive hill that they finally have overcome. They finally won a playoff game. They finally get to host a game on divisional round weekend. They get to play on divisional round weekend, and let alone the fact that they get to host it as well. And they get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who went 9-8, barely won their division, and had a kind of rough few weeks going into the playoffs, but then they took it to the Eagles. And who's to say if the Buccaneers, with that defense, could potentially be an issue for this Lions offense? It's gonna be really interesting to see how this plays out. What do you think is gonna happen here?
They definitely do stand a chance. I want to shout out the reporter that asked Todd Bowles what they were doing to prepare for the weather in Detroit, despite the fact that it is a domed game.
Yeah, that's a real. What are we doing?
But the Lions did not collapse last week.
Yep.
The Buccaneers are another team that just can collapse at any moment. Baker, love him, not the most reliable guy, on a game-to-game basis. So, I think that there's a lot more in the Lions' favor. It is not a guarantee at all, but Lions, you're going to the NFC Championship.
I am hopeful for them to get this game. I think that they're going to do it. I'm going to pick them. I just, like I said earlier, I hope they do not overlook this team. Like they should.
Yeah, they need to stop here, prepare here.
Yeah, because I don't think that this is going to be. I don't think it's going to be as easy as when the Buccaneers were in creamsicle uniforms when you played against them.
Yeah,
I think that they're going to be a different team, and you just have to be prepared. I will say, like, Lions, the biggest weakness for them has been their defense, but I think the fact that the Buccaneers are used to throwing the ball a lot, could cause an issue for the Lions, but I don't know. I still feel like the Lions as an offense is in good shape, and they also have Sam Laporta has another week to get healthy.
Yeah,
and that's going to be a huge weapon for them the more healthy he gets. There's I think that they're a little stacked on offense to be stopped.
Yep. And our final game, the third meeting of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, or the fourth in the postseason.
Is it? I'm trying to think.
I think it's the third.
It's the third, yeah.
It's the third. But the first one in Buffalo.
Yeah.
Thanks to the Bills, last season or end of season push to get themselves back into not only the playoff mix but the division crown after we all thought it was going to Miami. Managed to take care of swift business against the Steelers. Kansas City, we've talked about them a little bit, have struggled. But this will be the first time that they're in the postseason on the road. And Kansas City has not been infallible this season by any stretch of the word.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard to tell what these teams are going to do to match up. This is one of those matchups that can always go either way, I think.
It's so hard. This game sucks to pick. I have my Super Bowl prediction was Bills Lions, and luckily I don't necessarily need to change it.
Yeah.
But I worry. I feel like this Bills. I feel like the Bills offense will be able to do some things. I feel like the Bills offense will be able to take care of. I mean, I think at the very least they will be able to run the ball. And maybe that might be enough. But I don't know. It's tough. It's just a tough matchup for them when the Chiefs defense is playing as well as it is. And then on the other side, you have the Bills' defense, which is injured. You might have Rozo Douglas come back, though. You might have a couple of other key players, luckily playing. I'll stick with the Bills, even though I'm so worried about this game, because I don't want to get my hopes up here. I don't want to think that we will knock out the Chiefs, because really what it comes down to here, Matt, is if the Lions and Bills win these respective games, I would not have a care in the world who wins the Super Bowl. I really
literally.
I would be totally satisfied with whoever wins it. I'd be satisfied with the season. Like it comes down to just like you take out a Bucks team that I just think has gone further than they maybe deserve, and a Chiefs team that has just been here constantly. And I'll go with the Bills, even though the instincts in me is to pick the Chiefs to jinx them. But
you got to pick with your heart, Chris.
Yeah.
That also said, I'm picking the Bills because that would result in a Ravens Bills and the Lions 49ers championship weekend. At that point, anyone winning the Super Bowl is a happy birthday to me.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It would be great. It would be phenomenal. That's like that is the ideal situation. I could like the Saturday matchups for me personally. I could care less about who ends up winning that. If I'm being honest, like I like all those teams for the most part, and I think it would be a fascinating story either way.
Yeah.
But Sunday is the big one, because you have I have the two teams that are at like the top of like my rooting interest, and I would say the two teams at the bottom of my rooting interest right now. So I'm really, really, really hopeful that the Bills could pull it off here.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm gonna end up with the Chiefs Packers Super Bowl on my birthday and be super sad.
Oh man, Jesus, yeah. Before we go, wanted to revisit the playoff likability rankings that we had. So now the current rankings as they stand, after I adjusted all the numbers to change, I didn't change the order, just the numbers next to them. So in order, from least liked to most liked, we have the Chiefs, then the Packers, then the Bucks, then the Niners, Texans, Bills, Ravens, and then the Lions are still top. The Ravens jumped the Bills. I think mainly because the Ravens became my fourth team that I was rooting for instead of being like 7.
Yeah.
I also did a likability thing with the Super Bowl matchups, and our the matchup that would make us the most happy based off of our rankings would be Lions Ravens.
Of course.
And that's followed by Lions Bills and Lions Texans. You sense a trend.
I think we like the Lions.
But then that's followed by the same 3 AFC teams facing the Niners. So it's just like, all right. So clearly you could tell where our rooting interest is going in. Where AFC, it's really anyone but the Chiefs, and then the NFC we have 2 teams that we're rooting on the most. Although I think the biggest the biggest difference is I would be okay with the Packers advancing the Super Bowl versus Matt. It would be just like, please, anything but. And playoff records, we went 4-2 last week, and we have the same exact picks again this week. So
yay!
We'll just be in lockstep the rest of the way. I'm cool with that. I'm fine with that. That's all good. All right, and with that, folks, that is the end of our podcast. A lot of talking, a lot of recapping. It'll be a much less to talk about next week. We might even do our return to the VBFL next week. So we'll see what happens. We might also have a shit ton of coaching news, and we have to scratch that all together. So who knows? But thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
Good night, and good ball.